Harsh words today from the White House on an explosive new book about President Trump's White House.
I'm not going to go through every single page of the book, but there are numerous examples of falsehoods that take place in the book. I'll give you one just because it's really easy. The fact that there was a claim that the president didn't know who John Boehner was is pretty ridiculous, considering the majority of you have seen photos. And frankly, several of you have even tweeted out that the president not only knows him, but has played golf with him, tweeted about him. I mean, that's pretty simple and pretty basic. Ages of employees, which would be super easy to fact check, are wrong. Again, there are numerous mistakes, but I'm not going to waste my time or the country's time going page by page talking about a book that's complete fantasy and just full of tabloid gossip, because it's sad, pathetic, and our administration and our focus is going to be on moving the country forward.
Comes after the president's legal team sent a letter to the book's publisher demanding they halt publication. His lawyers also threatened legal action against former chief strategist Steve Bannon, who slammed the president and his family. In the book, Bannon calls a meeting between the president's son, campaign aides, and Russian officials treasonous and unpatriotic. He also says special counsel Robert Mueller's Russia investigation is all about money laundering. In response, President Trump fired back yesterday that Bannon, quote, lost his mind when he was ousted from the White House. Today, he was asked about the feud for the first time.
Did Steve Bannon betray you, Mr. President?
Thank you.
Any words about Steve Bannon?
I don't know. He called me a great man last night, so, you know, he obviously changed his tune pretty quick. All right, thank you all very much. Thank you. I don't talk to him.
Jordan Frasier is a video reporter for The Washington Post. He joins us now. Hey, Jordan, so the president's already threatening legal action. This isn't the first time that he's done so. Do you think that this is more of a scare tactic?
It's absolutely a scare tactic, and this is something that dates back to his time in New York when he was back in real estate and not in politics. This is a tactic that the president has used hundreds of times, but there's not really a threat here. This book is going to be published. I think this is more of an empty threat in my book.
And you know, Michael Wolff had a column today in which he writes about his access to the White House, and he describes being able to check in every week at a hotel, make appointments with various staffers, wandering across the street to the White House, and then he can kind of plunk himself down on the West Wing couch. What do you think this says about this White House, that the fact they didn't raise red flags any sooner?
Right. I think it speaks to the kind of the chaos and the unorganization of the White House, right? If there were more kind of strict rules, there's no chance this would have happened. We saw even a more recent example of this. Former White House advisor Omarosa, who is now out of the White House, but she got in trouble for bringing members of her wedding party through the White House, and that's just not something that's done. And if there were more of a strict regime present, especially early on in the Trump administration, there's no way that this sort of access would have been allowed.
And isn't she also threatening to write a tell-all book at some point?
Right.
Be interesting to see how that goes down. You know, Sarah Huckabee Sanders in the press briefing was saying that the book was just full of lies. Right. And she even went so far as to call him out. Then she referenced other pieces of information in it that were favorable. What do you think this says about their strategy moving forward on this?
Right. I think the White House is going to continue to push back on this. But when I look at this book and what's been reported, there's enough. I think this is a where there's smoke, there's fire situation, right? Because a lot of what is here, we've kind of heard bits and pieces before. The things about how the president spends his personal time, interactions between White House staff members, things like this leak out over the course of the year that we saw, the first year of the Trump administration. So there's enough proof here based on other reporting and other sources that we know that the sentiment of the book is probably credible. I think the examples that she chose to point out as being factually inaccurate, the president knowing who John Boehner was, saying that there's photos of them together, those staff members' ages she picked out, saying that some of those were inaccurate in the book. Those weren't really convincing to me. You know, I think it'll be interesting to see if the White House chooses some other, maybe larger facts to push back on. It will also be interesting to see how the author pushes back on the White House, right? We've heard that there are reports that he has some tape recordings of some of these conversations. And it'll also be notable if people the author spoke to also decide to come out and say, yes, that's true, I did say that, and I stand by what I told the author.
Jordan, what do you make of the fact that the White House is now cracking down on the use of personal devices in the West Wing?
Yeah, so this probably is long overdue. I think there's probably been a little bit of a lax policy, even when it comes to the president, right? There's been reporting that he spends a lot of time up in the residence talking on cell phones, and that's not really something that normally happens in the White House, I don't think. So I think this is probably a long overdue enforcement. The White House staff probably won't be thrilled about it. It'll probably make their communicating a little more difficult. But the goal here is obviously to cut down on leaks. And the White House is desperate to cut down on leaks. And I think they will try anything. This just seems like the next logical step in trying to accomplish that.
Jordan Frasier. Thanks, Jordan.
Thanks very much.